Okay, how's everybody doing here? Today we're doing a video on stealth 5th generation aircraft, including those that are active and those that have been prototyped and are still being considered. I don't have the Japanese small prototype in because it is really a test article and not a prototype yet, but the Japanese have built a flying article that they will at some point either turn into a production model or they will continue with the F-35. So let's look at these real quick. First we have right here the F-22 Raptor. This is considered to be, and in fact is, probably the most capable all around, well, not say all around, I would say the most capable fighter 5th generation stealth aircraft. The United States was in the process of building 600 of these when the Obama administration canceled the rest of the order after 173 had been built, which in my mind was a foolish thing to do because it is still recognized as the best available aircraft in terms of air superiority, but there are only 173 of them available. Let's turn it over here real quick and see what it looks like on the bottom. What you see there is room in the main compartment for 8 AMRAAM missiles, and then on each side you have a compartment for shorter range missiles, in this case sidewinders. Now the reason that they purportedly canceled that fighter was that it was too good. According to what they felt, the Obama administration, the Chinese would not have a production stealth fighter until 2025, and the Russians either in that same time frame or later. Well, unfortunately, the next year, 2012, when Defense Secretary Gates visited China, they rolled out the initial prototype of their 5th generation fighter. That was 7 years ago. Now, what we have here is the J-20 in its production mode. I wish I had the production level low vis decals and marking for it, but I don't. What came with the model were these high vis Chinese markings. However, they have gone well beyond the prototype stage, which they built 8 or 9 of, and they are in production. Numbers to date go anywhere from 36 to 50 aircraft in the air. Let's turn this one over and see what it looks like. Amazing. Very similar. We've got 8 medium to long range missiles in the middle, and then a smaller compartment on each side for a smaller, shorter range missile. Very similar to the F-22. Now, one thing you're going to notice about this fighter is that the nozzles on the engines are sticking out, and from certain angles the heat signature may be obvious, more obvious than in the F-22. If you look at the F-22 back here, these are variable movement in pieces to the nozzles that allow that aircraft to adjust its heat signature in the back. Also, the Russians, although they haven't gone into production, the Russians have produced 7 or 8, I believe, of their fifth generation fighter. And when this model came out, it wasn't made up, but if we can get in here and look at it, you'll see where they keep their weapons are back here in the back. There is a weapons bay here and a smaller one here. So the thought is long range, larger missiles and weapons here, shorter range missiles here. So a little different. But again, on their aircraft as well, you notice that the engines are poking out the back, and so from a back view of that thing, you might pick up some heat signature. But that is not into full production by any means, so it's back there in the back, and it's back there along with the YF-23. Now I think the F-23, in fact I believe the testing of this aircraft before it lost to the F-22 showed that it was the better of the two in terms of stealth. That's probably the best stealth fighter that has been built. And as you notice, it's got a center line, large compartment. It never got to the point of fully developing its weapons bays, but it was a very capable aircraft, not as maneuverable as the F-22, which is the reason was given for it not being chosen. However, in terms of stealth, if you look at this thing, the way that its stealth was created for both heat, radar, and communications, it is a very quiet aircraft as well as nimble. And Northrop Grumman keeps that airplane available. For example, the F-15E sooner or later will need to be replaced. There's still talk of the F-18 E and F being replaced. Of course, the builder of the F-15 E and F has come out with an advanced F-15 E and F that all of them can be upgraded to, that adds a conformal tank and a stealthy weapons pod. But it does not make it a stealth aircraft. It just makes it last longer and be more stealthy than it is. My hope is that at some point we will build a number of the F-23s. That is an unbelievably good aircraft. But what we have done is build these three aircraft in front, which is, of course, the F-35. The one to the furthest to my right here is the F-35A, which is the Air Force version. I've got this one showing not just the stealth weapons load, but a full weapons load on its wings. They have reduced the price of these things. They are finally coming in, as they said they would, at the price of a modernized F-16. You know, the latest, greatest F-16 with all the upgrades. You can get an F-35A for about the same price, and people are doing it. And then, even more importantly, I think, is the next one over, which is the F-35B. This is the vertical takeoff and landing, or short and vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. You see this one with just the stealth mode, carrying 2 AMRAAM missiles and a couple of larger bombs. It can carry up to 3 large weapons in its 2 different pods. 6 to 8 weapons altogether in the 2 pods. What is so important about this aircraft is that it is now giving ourselves and our allies the ability to launch a 5th generation supersonic stealth aircraft off of smaller aircraft carriers. VTOL carriers, or what others would call stow-bar carriers, depending on how big they are and what functions they have. But let's just say carriers that don't have catapults and typically rely on fourth or 4.5 generation fighters are now seeing in Japan and in Korea, South Korea, and very potentially in Australia, certainly in Italy and Spain and Turkey and other places, and not to mention in the United States with the 8 LHD, LHA amphibious assault ships that are 40,000 to 45,000 tons. Each one of those can be configured to be an escort or light carrier and carry 24 to 30 of these F-35Bs. And 30 F-35Bs going up against even 40 or 45 of the fourth generation fighters that other countries are building for their carriers is something that worries them greatly, and they have a right to be worried because these stealth aircraft are not only very stealthy, their sensor capabilities are simply amazing. They, in essence, are mini AWACS themselves, each one of them. And so they communicate with the P-8s, the EWACS, the AWACS, like the S3, the E3 Sentry, or the E2D Hawkeye, and they get a full picture, and the satellites and everything else. So having those aircraft now on multiple aircraft carriers has allowed the United States and its allies to really leap ahead, particularly in the Western Pacific, where there is a naval arms race going on right now, as China quickly grows its capabilities in terms of aircraft carriers, in terms of surface shipping. They're a little slower in the nuclear submarine area, which is an Achilles heel to them. But the United States has now come up with this answer that is allowing Japan and Korea and other nations to stand up and answer the call, and they're doing so, and that's great news for us, I've got to tell you. And then finally we have the F-35C. The F-35C is the U.S. Navy's large aircraft carrier version of this aircraft. This is a full loadout scenario, again with the 6 weapons in the bomb bays, or the bays, as well as 6 or 8 weapons on the wings. So anywhere from 12 to 14 weapons. This aircraft also has a larger wing, significantly larger, and so it carries more fuel and can carry more weapons. And they are being now tested on the large aircraft carriers for the United States, and ultimately there will be a squadron, probably to begin with, of 12, and then 20, and then probably ultimately 24 of those, as the United States decides what to do with the F-15E and F, where there'll be 24 at least of those as well. Hint, 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 YF-23. But at that time frame, we'll also be looking at the 6th generation aircraft from Boeing and Grumman and others. So all of that's a timing game. The big thing about the F-35 now is that they, for the Air Force and the Marines, they are in production building, and they are carrying out missions. We have now built more of those aircraft than we have F-22s, and we're going to build a lot more. The United States itself, between the 3 of these aircraft, will have 34 or 3,500 of these aircraft, and that's very good news for us as our potential adversaries build their answer. to those aircraft. I do not believe that the Chinese will be able to build nearly that many of the J-20s. And we're yet to see what the Russians will do with their aircraft. But the United States will, and I expect that between our many allies that are accepting this aircraft now, from Israel to Australia to, Norway, the list goes on, the United Kingdom, there probably are going to end up being over 5,000 F-35s out there. And that is a very good sign. 5,000 of those with 173 F-22s to come along where needed will be a very good picture. And if we are lucky and smart, we'll end up building 600 or 800 of those babies right back there, because that is one heck of a good fighter. And it may not be as nimble, but you don't have to be as nimble when you can't be seen and you can't be picked up. So this is Jeff Head, the Jeff Head YouTube channel. I thought I'd give a rundown on the fighters that are out there, and I have to say and congratulate the Chinese on having come so far in so quick a time. Their aircraft carriers, their new cruiser-sized vessels, they've beaten us to the draw on us building the replacement for the Ticonderoga cruisers, which are still, I believe, the best surface action vessel in the world. But the new Type 55 that the Chinese have, and you can look at that on my channel or elsewhere and see, is a darn good vessel. They have two carriers that are stow bar. They're building a third, which is going to be like our own. We call them catobar, which means catapult and barrier assisted takeoff, catapult launch, and barrier assisted landing. But this has been about stealth fighter aircraft, and there you have them. Those are the ones that have been built and flown successfully and built in some numbers. All of these up front are actually in production. The two in back are not, but they're available, and I expect the Russians will maybe very soon go into low initial rate production with that aircraft, because they desperately need it. But their finances are hurting, and one of the things that Trump has done in terms of increasing the United States oil flow to where we are the largest supplier of oil in the world now, with the largest reserves, has hurt the Russians in terms of their money, because their main income right now comes from their oil. And if our European allies begin in a big way getting their oil from us, which I think they should, then their economy and their ability to build things quickly is going to continue to slow down. But once again, there you have it. The ones that are produced and being produced are the J-20, the F-22, and the three versions of the F-35. And the United States has far and away, many, many times over, the largest number of these aircraft, and I think it will remain that way as the F-35 numbers continue to grow in a big way. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you have a good evening. Please take a look at some of the other videos I have, particularly in shipping. By the way, I just recently bought 1/350th scale ISA. It's the second Hyuga class small DDH that could carry 6 or 8 F-35Bs, but I expect for the most part they will remain anti-submarine vessels carrying a good number of anti-submarine helicopters, and it will be left to the Zimu and its sister the Kaga to carry the F-35s that they are buying, the F-35Bs. Thanks again. Good night.